afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of several colleagues, I will summarise a few observations about contributions of the two multi-actor platforms in Scotland, the one of rural Scotland and that focusing on the River Dee catchment. And Elodie, if you can help me by moving to the next slide. I'd like to remind myself, as well as yourselves, of the principal purposes of the platforms. I'll not read this out completely, but it's to remind us that they're forums for exchanging ideas, engaging across citizens and researchers, policymakers, so across types of areas of responsibility and levels, and in jointly developing strategic thinking and practical actions, recommendations and actions. And I wonder, Elodie, if we can go to the mechanisms relating to that, at least in the UK maps, are one or two of the things I will introduce to you. And one is the contribution of all the actors in these platforms to the development of different angles of thinking, which we then contribute to the discussion and position papers. I know that one or two of the actors on the call just now, and thank you to them for their time and that of their employers or the organisations they represent. The process of developing the knowledge and the perspectives to bring to bear on policy and practice is very important as an outcome if we are strengthening our social capital and our networks. And if I may just go to the final bullet point on this slide, one observation, Elodie, from a member of one of the maps from the Cairngorms National Park Authority was that the process and outcome of, in this case, the climate change and environmental sustainability paper is helpful in developing their thinking on where the National Park Authority can contribute to tackling the climate emergency. So we believe that these are in themselves, our processes, are ways in which the policy officers or those responsible in different areas and different levels can make best use of the information being shared. If we move to the next slide, Elodie, this is about contributing to processes and sharing understanding. And by bringing to bear some of the science evidence to the wider practice and policy sectors, we are, I think, able to contribute to the quality of the planning and decision making. And peatland restoration is one example. And if we move, Elodie, to the next part of the slide, it is to illustrate three elements of the evidence that can be drawn upon and has been to engage in discussion with policy teams in Scotland at local levels, local authority, one of the MAP members being part of a local authority in a planning capacity, through to Scottish government level, which in SHERPA terms is regional. And this is about investing in natural capital and believing that actions can make a difference in reducing greenhouse gas emissions by restoring peatland. But as is often the case, it's not quite as simple as that. And numbers do not tell the whole story in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. There are the biophysical sciences to inform us of the length of time it takes to set a former or a badly degraded bog on a journey to restoration. It's the nature of the greenhouse gases that they'll absorb in that restoring process, carbon and the methane that they will emit at a mature stage. So it's a complexity which is requiring to be communicated, picked up, and then the geographic distributions to be understood by those who've got responsibilities for planning what other uses of land there might be, forestry, agriculture, or left untouched. So if we move to the next bullet point on this slide, Elodie, the example of the key messages is the observation I wish to share with you here, that measures need to be designed to take account of geographic variation in the magnitude and rates of reductions in greenhouse gases. Not only that peatland restoration is part of the solution. And that by facilitating different approaches by business, non-governmental organizations and communities, different outcomes can be achieved. And the message here in the next bullet point, Elodie, for the map is that the maps have provided a forum for sharing technical knowledge, societal insight to barriers and attitudes of people towards uptake, and opportunities for new thinking on where there may be economic return by investing in natural capital. And that's at least being discussed within 2 of the partner local authorities and the Biosphere Reserve. And as you've seen, the National Park Authority, at least 1. If we move to the next slide, the next aspect of this that I'd like to share is in relation to deliberations about public policy. And the map originated the suggestion of contributing to COP26 in my hometown of Glasgow, and therefore in the remit or the area of Scotland, which put Scotland and the topic on a global stage. So the observations here are the global priority and that of national, regional and local agencies of achieving climate neutrality by 2045 in the Scottish case. And the members of the maps, the responsibilities that they have for their organisations, all also have formal or informal plans to migrate to net zero by 2045. So a co-designing of events at COP26, the stand, the online sessions, the public display, in turn has delivered back on some of the broader aims of these organisations and also brought into the discussion new thinking and perspectives from international and local audiences. If we move to the next slide, Elodie, this helps us inform policy and action in some areas that may well not be as high profile, but are represented within the map, picking up dimensions, in this case, of the mental health and well-being of rural people. And the member of the map, Mr. Hume, the convener of the National Rural Mental Health Forum, contributes and contributed through both on-site representation, video messages, and populating materials for us to use, and in turn, the forum for him to use to then take to wider audiences. In this case, that includes informing the funders of the forum, and also of the National Rural Mental Health Forum, and also of taking the feedback gathered from national and international agencies to thinking through their implementation of a policy measure. In this case, the forum contributes to Support in Mind Scotland, which is responsible for implementing a policy measure on the Rural Community Engagement Fund, specifically on the well-being of rural communities. So the take-home message in the next slide here, the next bullet point, Elodie, is that in citing, in participating, in using that evidence in other forums, and then the next bullet point, please, Elodie, what this map representative is able to do is draw on the mechanisms to exchange evidence and to join up measures, in this case, mental health, rural well-being, the well-being of rural peoples, and wider policy objectives. And if we move to the next slide, Elodie, please, this is about the same perception of the members of the maps using the Sherpa forums to win on their own institutional objectives. In this case, managing soil carbon and recreating carbon sinks. The videos which here National Trust for Scotland developed both for Sherpa and more broadly were also used in their contribution to COP26 in the Blue Zone, where the real negotiations were, or at least the policy discussions were taking place. So we were not represented there, but we were providing materials which members could deploy in their contributions to global, in this case, policy in the UNFCCC Peatlands Pavilion. And so the message on the final bullet point of this slide, Elodie, is that the maps are providing one in a portfolio of different means of members to engage directly with policy at multiple levels, from local through to international. And if we move to the final slide of example, this is where the river catchment level, the decatchment partnership, which aligns with one of the maps in Sherpa, highlighted here on the right is how they are tackling the climate emergency and using the Sherpa materials as part of the storylines and the narratives informing their representatives. And their representatives are parts of or members of that decatchment map who contribute to the papers and documents I highlighted a moment ago. So Elodie, if we move to the content of that slide, what I'm noting here is linking the scientific evidence with the on-the-ground experience and actions of the individuals and organisations delivering on the ground has, Elodie, with the final bullet point on this slide, directly informed, not been responsible for, but informed the restoration of 2 kilometres of river channel, which is reducing flood risk and creating benefits for nature. And that won a Scottish-wide national award in November of last year at the Nature of Scotland Awards. So with that, if we move to the final slide, it's to note of thanks to all the members of the 2 maps, Rural Scotland and Decatchment, and of the contributions from the research team here at James Hutton Institute and my colleagues. And with that, Olivier, I will pause. Thank you.